All right, my young friends, we're going to give this a try. So last year I recorded lots of videos and lectures, and it was just a camera staring at me as I read the book. And so I don't have lots of these videos, but I'm going to try to record some more for days I just have to record a lecture, which is just something for you to be watching. I'm going to try to do some where I go on a hike and some things like this, but just something to watch in the background. So we're talking chapters 4 and 5 on the Scarlet Letter today. And this is when Chillingsworth, Hester's husband, comes to visit her in jail. And at this point, her baby Pearl is kind of freaking out and screaming, and Chillingworth, who is a doctor and has lots of knowledge of medicine and herbs, shows up and helps. And he gives the baby a draft and something to drink, and that calms the baby down, and then he has something for Hester. And Hester says on page 6768 in the PDF and 6970 in the Red Book, "I've thought of death," she said. "Have even wished for it, would even have prayed for it, were fit that such as I should pray for anything. Yet, if death be in this cup, I bid thee think again ere thou beholdest me quaff it. See, it is even now at my lips." So she's saying, I've thought about dying since this has happened, but I don't want to die now, and I don't want to die this way. So make sure, are you going to promise me that you're not giving me poison to drink? And Chillingsworth's reaction is a good one, and he said, "Drink then," replied he, still with the same cold composure. "Dost thou know me so little, Hester Prynne? Are my purposes wont to be so shallow? Even if I imagine a scheme of vengeance, what could I do better for my object than to let thee live, so that this burning shame may still blaze upon thy bosom? Now," he says, "the biggest punishment I can give you is to let you live as long as you possibly can so you can keep wearing this letter. So don't worry, it's my goal that you live a good, long life." Now, as they start to talk, because Chillingsworth, and that is the name of her husband, wanted to come and visit her. Remember, they saw them when she made eye contact with him the first time in the town square, and he put his finger up to his lips to kind of silence her. Now, he kind of acknowledges his part in this, and he said, "I ask not wherefore, nor how thou hast fallen into the pit, or say rather thou hast ascended to the pedestal of infamy on which I found thee. The reason is not far to seek. It was my folly and thy weakness. I, a man of thought, the bookworm with great libraries, a man already in decay, having given my best years to feed the hungry dream and knowledge, what had I to do with youth and beauty like thine own? Misshapen from my birth hour, how could I delude myself with the idea that intellectual gifts might veil physical deformity in a young girl's fancy? Men call me wise. If sages were ever wise in their own behoof, I might have foreseen all this." And he said, look, we still don't know exactly how these two ended up getting married, but he's a lot older than she is. I'd say he's probably in his 60s. She's in her 20s. She's beautiful. He, as he describes himself, is misshapen. And he said, I should have seen this, right? This marriage was not going to work. And Hester, for her part, says to him, I never pretended to love you, right? And she said, "I never pretended. I never showed you love, and you knew how I felt." And he agrees. And then they go on page 69 of the PDF and 71 in the Red Book. "I have greatly wronged thee," murmured Hester. "We have wronged each other," answered he. "Mine was the first wrong, when I betrayed thy budding youth into a false and unnatural relation with my decay." Then she says, then he goes on and says, "But Hester, the man lives who has wronged us both. Who is he?" "Ask me not," replied Hester Prynne, looking firmly into his face. "Thou shalt never know." "Never, sayest thou?" rejoined he, with a smile of dark and self-relying intelligence. "Never know him. Believe me, Hester, there are few things, whether in the outward world or to a certain depth in the invisible spheres of thought, few things hidden from the man who devotes himself earnestly and unreservedly to the solution of a mystery." Now, he said, look, I'm going to figure it out. And he's in a really good position to do so because he is a doctor, right? And colonial era America, doctors were a rare commodity, and to have one just happen into your community is a really useful thing, right? And so, as the doctor in this community, he's going to get a chance to talk to lots of people. He goes on and says, "I shall seek this man as I have sought truth in my books, as I have sought gold in alchemy. There is a sympathy that will make me conscious of him. I shall see him tremble. I shall feel myself shudder suddenly and unawares. Sooner or later, he needs be mine." Now, going on a little bit. Now, as they're getting ready to go, he just makes her promise one thing. And he said, no matter what, you can't give up my name, right? And she doesn't get this. And she says, "Wherefore dost thou desire it?" inquired Hester, shrinking she hardly knew why from his secret bond. "Why not renounce thyself openly and cast me off at once?" "It may be," he replied, "because I will encounter the dishonor that besmirches the husband of a faithless woman. It may be for other reasons. Enough, it is my purpose to live and die unknown." Now, he says, look, She said, why don't you just come out and say you're my husband and tell me to get lost? I almost said something more inappropriate. Get lost. And so why don't you just do that? And he said, first of all, it could be that, if I have to walk around as a husband whose wife cheated on me in this small village, that's bad for my reputation. He said that it might be that, or it may be just that I have other ideas that you don't need to know about. Now, lastly, as he's getting ready to go, she said, because he gives her this really creepy smile on page at the very end of the chapter, she says, why dost thou smile so at me? Inquired Hester, troubled at the expression of his eyes. Art thou like the black man that haunts the forest round about us? Hast thou enticed me into a bond that will prove the ruin of my soul? Not thy soul, he answered with another smile. No, not thine. So he said, we're not going to ruin your soul. No, not yours. Now, what he's intending with this message is that they're going to ruin the dude's soul, right? Whoever had the affair with Hester, he's going to find this person out, and it's Chillingsworth gold to torture them mentally, especially as long as possible. Now, going on to chapter 5, Hester, part of her punishment was making this letter, right? And it so happens that she is an excellent seamstress, right? She sews, which is very, very useful because otherwise she would not have any ability to support herself, right? And if she can't support herself financially, then she has to resort to begging or charity of the town or illegal means, right? But this allows her to support herself. And it said, it may be so, actually, before we even get to that point, it also talks about in the beginning of chapter 5 why she didn't leave, right? Before we even get into her job. And so, first of all, it said, it may be so, and this is 74, 75 in the PDF, 76 in the Red Book. It may be, too, doubtless it was so, although she hid the secret from herself, and grew pale whenever it struggled out of her heart like a serpent from its hole. It might be that another feeling kept her within the scene and pathway that had been so fatal. There dwelt, there trod the feet of one with whom she deemed herself connected in a union that, unrecognized on earth, would bring them together before the bar of final judgment, and make that their marriage altar, for joint futurity of endless retribution. So one reason is that the dude's still there. And even though she knows she's not going to get to see the dude, or talk to the dude, or have this relationship with the dude, he's still there, right? And hopefully, if she stays there with him, that they'll be together in heaven. And the other reason is, she said this is where she sinned, and so this is where she needs to make up for her sin, atone for it. On page 76 in the PDF, 76 also in the Red Book, here, she said to herself, had been the scene of her guilt, and here should be the scene of her earthly punishment. And so, perchance, the torture of her daily shame would at length purge her soul and work out another purity than that which she had lost, more saint-like because of the result of martyrdom. Hester Prynne, therefore, did not flee. Right? Now, as I was saying, luckily she has a talent, right? A very good talent that allows her to be very successful financially. And she gives most of the financial success she has to charity. Lonely as, and this is 77 in both the PDF and 77 in the Red Book, lonely as Hester's situation, and without a friend on earth who dared to show himself, she, however, incurred no risk of want. She possessed an art that sufficed, even in a land that afforded comparatively little scope for its exercise, to supply food for a thriving infant herself. It was the art, then, as now, almost the only one within a woman's grasp, and that's sexist, sorry, this is old book, of needlework. She bore on her breast, in the curiously embroidered letter, a specimen of her delicate and imaginative skill, of which the dames of the court might gladly have availed themselves to add to the richer and more spiritual adornment of human ingenuity to their fabrics of the silk and gold. Now, because she's able to support herself financially, and she has this one talent, she never has to worry about not having enough, right? And she is good enough, and her talent is such that the clothing that she makes comes to become fashionable in this community, right? And so the wealthy and powerful people within Puritan society, people who do not have a lot of power, wear very simple clothing, as we'll see, because Hester designs her clothing that way. But she also, because we have on page 78 in the PDF, it's certain that she had ready and fairly requited employment for as many hours as she saw fit to occupy with her needle. She had as much work as she could possibly take. Vanity, it may be, chose to mortify itself by putting on ceremonials of pomp and state, the garments that had been wrought by her sinful hands. The needlework had been seen on the ruff of the governor, military men wore it on their scarfs, and the minister on his band. It decked the baby's little cap. It was shut up to be mildewed and molded away in the coffins of the dead. She made clothing for everybody, right? And as a result of doing this, she never really took much for herself. On page 78 in the PDF, 79 in the Red Book, Hester sought not to acquire anything beyond a subsistence of the plainest and most aesthetic description for herself and a simple abundance for her child. Her own dress was of the coarsest materials and the somber hue, with only that one ornament, the Scarlet Letter, which she was doomed to wear. Her child's attire, on the other hand, was distinguished by a fanciful, or we may say, a fantastic ingenuity, which served indeed to heighten the airy charm that early began to develop itself in the little girl, but which appeared also to have a deeper meaning, and we will speak further of that hereafter. So we'll come back to that point. She's making the clothes in an important way because the clothes look very much like the Scarlet Letter. And lastly, except for the small expenditure in the decoration of her infant, except for the clothing she makes for her daughter, Hester bestowed all her superfluous means in charity. Almost every bit of money she made, she gave it to charity, on wretches less miserable than herself, and who had not unfrequently insulted the hand that fed them. And frequently the people she would give charity to would insult her and be cruel to her. She just took it. She didn't do anything, right? She didn't say anything back, and she just basically lived she lived the life of a religious figure, right? Basically dedicating her life to charity and to helping the poor. And it's this actions and behavior that caused people to start to change their view of the Scarlet Letter and Hester. Lastly, one other thing, and we saw this with Abigail Williams in the Crucible, as a result of having this sin, she gets a knowledge of other people who have been sinful, right? And she starts to kind of see through the community just as Hester did. But sometimes, once in many days, and this is 81 in the PDF, 81, 82 in the Red Book, once in many days, or perchance in many months, she felt an eye, a human eye, upon the ignominious brand that seemed to give a momentary relief, as in half of her agony were shared. The next instant, back it all rushed again, with still a deeper throb of pain, for in that brief interval she had sinned anew, and she'd sinned alone. As she walks around, she sees, lastly, and this is near the end of the chapter, sometimes the red infamy upon her breast would give a sympathetic throb as she passed near a venerable minister or magistrate, the model of piety and justice, to whom the age of antique reverence looked up as to the mortal man in fellowship with angels. Sometimes she walks around with her head down, right, and she just has this feeling, right, this little shudder, this little feeling, and she's like, there's something evil here. And she looks up and it's a minister, right? You can imagine that being Paris, right, or somebody like that. Again, the mystic sisterhood would assert itself as she met the sanctified frown of some matron who, according to the rumors of all tongues, had kept cold snow within her bosom throughout her life. That unsunned sun in the matron's bosom and the burning shame on Hester Prynne, what did the two have in common? Then she walks by this older woman, right? Older woman, she's unmarried, and Hester had this passionate love affair, right? This woman who's a lot older her, she got this feeling from her too, this kind of knowledge of hidden sin. Okay? So that is about it for today. So you're going to read chapters 6 and 7 for your next class period, which will be Thursday or Friday. Thank you.